Step through a door and you might just step back in time to 1979, to a British pub where the air was thick with history, the rules were unwritten, and every corner held a story. This was a world on its own clock, a unique social institution that, in many ways, has vanished. Push open that heavy door, and you'll find yourself in a place that has remained unchanged for 3 decades. Your shoes find a slight resistance on a carpet steeped in decades of spilled bitter, while by the fire, a resident dog occupies the prime spot with an air of absolute comfort. This was the British pub in its 1970s and 80s prime, a social institution governed by unwritten rules and traditions so distinct they often bewildered outsiders. We enter now to explore its most unique and now largely forgotten features. Tucked behind frosted glass, often with its own entrance, lay the Snug, the pub's best-kept secret. This small, private room, capable of holding barely 6 people, fulfilled a vital social role. In an era where women drinking publicly could still draw unwanted attention, the frosted glass offered discretion, allowing them to enjoy a drink unseen from the main bar. It also provided a secluded space for locals to conduct private conversations or business. Some Snugs even featured a dedicated serving hatch, eliminating the need to enter the main bar area. These intimate nooks offered refuge for courting couples, pensioners seeking quiet on a boisterous Friday night, or anyone desiring a peaceful pint away from the crowds. The Snug embodied a quintessentially British trait, the preference for privacy and discretion, even within a public establishment. By the 1990s, most Snugs were demolished to create more open space, erasing a unique architectural feature found nowhere else globally. Emerging from the Snug, the main bar presented a stark contrast, an assault of flashing lights and electronic beeping. This was the unmistakable symphony of the pub fruit machine, the ubiquitous soundtrack to countless 1970s and 80s nights out. Contraptions promised instant rich. What truly distinguished British fruit machines were their unique nudge and hold features. These mechanisms fostered an illusion of skill, compelling players to continuously feed 10-pence pieces into the slot for hours. Punters would intently watch the reels spin, yearning for 3 bells or lucky 7s, as the machine expertly teased them with tantalizing near misses, meticulously designed to prolong engagement. The culture surrounding these machines was intense. Regulars developed elaborate superstitious rituals. Certain machines were deemed due a payout, and invariably, someone always claimed to possess a foolproof system. Many would spend entire evenings fixated on their chosen machine. A pint in one hand, coins clutched in the other, players fed their hopes into these machines, certain the next spin held the jackpot. These were more than mere gambling devices. They were integral social fixtures, often funding a landlord's annual holiday. After losing one's wages to the machine, a visit to the facilities might be required. And nothing epitomized the British pub experience quite like standing shoulder to shoulder with strangers at a communal trough urinal. These long porcelain fixtures, lining the walls of the gents, offered zero privacy and maximal awkwardness. A curious detail often observed was the placement of ice cubes within these troughs by landlords. The official rationale cited hygiene and odor control, yet it inadvertently created a peculiar British pub ritual, men aiming at the ice, transforming a basic bodily function into an impromptu game. The absence of dividers frequently led to unwanted conversations with the adjacent individual, both staring straight ahead at the wall, discussing football or the weather while attempting to maintain some semblance of dignity. These troughs were relics of an era when personal space was less valued and pub facilities were purely functional. Modern establishments have since replaced them with individual urinals, but the memories of those awkward moments persist. Back at the bar, relieved and ready for another round, one's choice of drink revealed more than might be expected. In a 1970s British pub, asking for a pint would most likely result in a serving of mild ale, not bitter. This sweeter, darker, lower alcohol beer was the working man's preferred choice, cheaper than bitter and ideal for shift workers seeking refreshment without excessive intoxication. Mild dominated northern industrial pubs, particularly where steelworkers and miners would consume several pints after a shift. At approximately 3% alcohol, it was inherently sessionable long before the term became fashionable, and its slightly lower price point, a few pence less than bitter, was a crucial factor for those managing tight budgets. However, the lager invasion of the 1980s brought about mild, swift decline. For a new generation of drinkers, lager represented modernity, while mild was dismissed as an antiquated, unfashionable beverage, a relic of their father's era. Breweries ceased production, and within a decade, mild had virtually vanished from British bars. Today, discovering a pub that serves mild is akin to finding a time capsule. An entire category of British beer, once the nation's favorite, has been relegated to history. Yet, not every patron frequented the bar solely for the beer. Every proper British pub hosted a resident dog, a canine fixture, often possessing more authority than most customers. Whether sprawled before the fire or positioned behind the bar, these animals were treated like royalty, frequently better fed and more comfortable than the human clientele. The landlord's dog knew every regular, tolerated strangers with weary resignation, and possessed a sixth sense for dropped crisps or pork scratchings. They could sleep through the loudest Friday night revelry, yet invariably awoke at the rustle of a cheese and onion packet. These were not guard dogs or working animals. They served as pub mascots, conversation starters, and unofficial greeters. Customers inquired about them by name, brought them treats, and genuinely mourned their passing. This tradition has largely faded with tightened health regulations and the rise of corporate pub chains. But in that era, a pub without a dog sleeping by the fire simply wasn't a proper pub. While the pub dog enjoyed its privileged position, the beer flowing from the 70s British pub, praising Watney's without throwing a punch. This keg bitter became, quite simply, the most reviled beer in Britain, a stark symbol of everything wrong with corporate brewing. Watney's was pasteurized, filtered, and served under pressure. This process ensured a longer shelf life, but utterly stripped the beer of any character. It tasted metallic, gassy, and bore no resemblance to traditional cask ale. Yet, it was ubiquitous, aggressively pushed by breweries who valued its profitability, leaving drinkers with little alternative. This beer, however, inadvertently sparked a revolution. The Campaign for Real Ale, CAMRA, was founded in 1971 specifically to combat the Watneysification of British beer. They championed traditional brewing methods and authentic cask ale. Watney's quickly became a punchline, the beer everyone loved to hate. By the 1980s, even the company recognized its demise. The brand ultimately died, but in its unpopularity, it had inadvertently saved British brewing by reigniting public demand for quality. Regardless of the quality of your drink, good or terrible, you were standing on something truly special. British pub carpets were legendary, though not for their beauty. These were no ordinary floor coverings. They were psychedelic masterpieces of clashing patterns, swirling designs in browns, oranges, and reds that looked like a fever dream from the 1970s. But there was method to the madness. The chaotic pattern served a distinct purpose: to conceal stains, cigarette burns, and the relentless wear of countless feet moving between bar and toilet. The busier the design, the more effectively it camouflaged decades of spilled beer, dropped food, and other, less identifiable, detritus. These carpets also denoted social hierarchy. Saloon bars, with their soft flooring, commanded a penny or two more per pint than the stark public bar, where patrons literally paid for the privilege of comfort underfoot. Nearly indestructible, these carpets endured for decades, absorbing the very essence of the pub's character. While modern establishments often prefer wooden floors, they lack the peculiar, almost grotesque charm of their predecessors. But for those without immediate cash, a uniquely British solution existed. "Put it on the slate" was a phrase that both forged and fractured communities. This informal credit system allowed trusted regulars to drink throughout the week, settling their tab on payday Friday. The landlord maintained a literal slate or notebook behind the bar, meticulously chalking up every pint, packet of crisps, and whiskey chaser. This demanded exceptional memory and an even greater degree of trust. Some customers accumulated tabs of £20 or more, a substantial sum in the 1970s. Such a system thrived only in tight-knit communities, where personal reputation outweighed any formal credit score. Failure to pay one's slate resulted in social ostracism, a permanent ban, and a reputation that preceded you in every pub across town. The slate system ultimately faded with the decline of traditional working-class communities and the emergence of corporate pub chains, which insisted on cash up front. It marked an era where a man's word and a landlord's trust held more value than any written contract. For those with cash, snack options were both limited and, frankly, formidable. Behind every British pub bar hung packets of pork scratchings, arguably the most aggressively unhealthy snack ever conceived. These were not the refined pork rinds of today. Instead, they were substantial chunks of pigskin, often with fat still attached, fried to a rock-hard consistency and occasionally featuring a stray hair embedded in the rind. Consuming them was an extreme sport, known for cracking teeth, lacerating gums, and leaving a greasy residue on fingers that defied all attempts at washing. Their extreme saltiness was no accident. It was a deliberate design to induce thirst and encourage another pint. Yet men adored them. This primal act of gnawing on deep-fried pigskin was a direct link to an ancient British tradition of consuming every part of the animal, however unrefined. While modern health consciousness has relegated them to the fringes, in the 1970s and 80s, no pub was truly complete without these challenging snacks. Philosophy even further. Certain British pubs, particularly in bustling city centers and working-class districts, adopted a radical approach: no seating at all. These standing-room-only venues became temples of vertical drinking, where chairs were deemed soft, even unnecessary. The logic was brutally practical. More standing customers meant more bodies, more beer sold, and less obstruction to profit. But a profound cultural element also prevailed. Real men, it was believed, stood. Sitting was reserved for the saloon bar softies, who paid extra for carpeted comfort. These pubs were loud, crowded, and intense. You would find yourself shoulder to shoulder with strangers, pint held high to prevent spillage, shouting conversations over the constant din. Aching feet after an hour were simply part of the experience. This tradition has largely faded, as customers eventually decided comfort was not, in fact, a weakness. Yet, for a generation of British drinkers, a proper session meant remaining on your feet for the duration. Even for those fortunate enough to find a perch, the competitive spirit of the British pub was omnipresent. Pub darts in the 1970s and 80s were far from a casual pastime. It was a serious business, complete with organized leagues, distinctive uniforms, and rivalries that could span generations. Every pub fielded a team. Players treated their kit with the same reverence as any football team. Appearing without your shirt was unthinkable. League tables were routinely published in local newspapers. Matches attracted crowds of loyal supporters who traveled to away pubs, fostering an atmosphere of intense yet generally friendly competition. The best players achieved local celebrity status, their averages discussed with a reverence typically reserved for cricket statistics. The dartboard area itself was hallowed ground. You simply did not walk in front of someone mid-throw, you never touched their darts, and you certainly did not question the score's arithmetic, even when it was demonstrably incorrect. The sharp crack of darts striking the board often met its rival in another distinctive sound: the resounding thud of dominoes slammed onto a wooden table. This was a signature audio cue of the British pub. This was no gentle pastime for the elderly. Dominoes in the pub were competitive, theatrical, and at times intensely confrontational. Players were masters of the dramatic pause, followed by the aggressive slam. The force with which a domino struck the table directly correlated with a player's assertion of dominance. Tables would judder, pints would momentarily wobble, and the entire room would register the declaration of a winning move. Like darts, dominoes fostered leagues, tournaments, and dedicated teams. Players cultivated individual reputations. Some were human calculators, processing probabilities in their minds, while others were psychological warriors, employing intimidation and mind games. Rules varied significantly by region, leading to genuine feuds over proper dominoes etiquette. Variants such as 5s and 3s, block dominoes, and all fives each commanded devoted followers who often considered other forms inferior. It was, in essence, working-class chess, played with rectangular tiles and accompanied by beer. For those seeking respite from this competitive chaos, the pub offered a solution. Etched glass partitions, known as snob screens, divided many pub bars into semi-private booths. These were not merely decorative, they fulfilled a crucial social function in class-obsessed Britain. The screens permitted public drinking while preserving a degree of privacy. Through the etched glass, one could discern vague shapes and movement, but never clearly identify who occupied the adjacent booth. This allowed patrons to enjoy a pint without the obligation of acknowledging a boss, a neighbor, or an acquaintance to whom money was owed. The moniker snob screen arose from their patronage by middle-class drinkers who sought the pub experience without direct interaction with the working classes. They permitted presence in the same room, yet maintained a crucial social distance. These exquisite examples of Victorian and Edwardian craftsmanship were systematically removed by the thousands during pub modernization. Survived are now protected, recognized, albeit belatedly. Step into certain British pubs, and you would encounter games unique to these establishments. Among them, pub skittles, played either on a dedicated table or in an alley, involved launching a wooden ball at 9 pins. Bar billiards presented a table with specific holes, mushroom-shaped obstacles, and a set of rules often baffling to outsiders. These were not mere casual diversions. They sustained leagues, championships, and players who had honed their skills for decades. The equipment itself was frequently handmade, passed down through generations, and treated with profound reverence. Each region boasted its own variation. Devon skittles, for instance, differed notably from Gloucestershire skittles, and any assertion of one being superior could ignite genuine disputes. Bar billiards, in particular, remained shrouded in mystery, its scoring systems appearing deliberately designed to confuse. Yet these traditional games were already fading by the 1980s, succumbing to the rise of fruit machines and pool tables, which demanded less space and generated greater revenue. Today, discovering a pub still featuring working skittles or bar billiards is akin to unearthing a living fossil. For those less inclined towards such traditional pursuits, technology offered a more contemporary form of entertainment, the pub jukebox. This machine was a potent source of joy, frustration, and, at times, outright violence. For 10 pence, later 20 pence, patrons could select 3 songs, thereby inflicting their personal musical taste upon everyone present. This power was never exercised lightly. Playing the wrong song could elicit dirty looks, pointed comments, or, in extreme instances, physical threats. Unwritten rules governed its use. No slow songs before 9 p.m., nothing overtly heavy when families were present, and under no circumstances was the same song to be repeated unless one actively sought conflict. The jukebox also served as a tool for passive aggression. If an unwanted track was played, one would simply await their turn and retaliate with something even worse. Musical arms races could span an entire evening. The selection was invariably eclectic, blending current hits with 1960s classics, local favorites, and that one inexplicable tune nobody admitted liking, yet someone consistently chose. Jukeboxes crafted a unique soundtrack to pub life, a sonic tapestry that modern Spotify playlists have never quite replicated. All this music and competition inevitably stimulated an appetite, though culinary options were distinctly limited. The ploughman's lunch, often perceived as an ancient British tradition of bread, cheese, and pickle, was, in fact, a marketing invention by the Cheese Bureau in the 1960s. By the 1970s and 1980s, it had become a pub staple, the default choice for anyone seeking sustenance with their pint. The offering was straightforward: a substantial chunk of cheddar, a few slices of bread, butter, pickled onions, and Branston pickle. Occasionally, a token lettuce leaf and a single tomato might appear, serving a purely decorative purpose. It was presented on a wooden board, designed to convey a rustic, traditional appeal. Its brilliance lay in sheer simplicity. Pubs required no kitchens or dedicated chefs. Everything could be assembled in moments from ingredients with an almost indefinite shelf life. Preparation was foolproof, demanded no cooking, and its inherent saltiness practically guaranteed the order of another pint. The ploughman's became so ubiquitous that many genuinely believed it an ancient tradition, precisely the outcome its marketing had engineered. Beneath your feet, as you savored this invented tradition, the very floor itself might have concealed its own secrets. In rougher pubs, particularly those near docks, factories, or bustling markets, the floor was not carpeted or tiled. Instead, it was covered in sawdust, spread fresh daily and swept out each night, carrying away the detritus of the day's drinking. This sawdust served multiple purposes. It absorbed spilled beer, soaked up tobacco spit, and legend had it, made cleaning blood after the inevitable Friday night brawls considerably easier. Practical and cheap, this practice gave these establishments their enduring nickname, spit and sawdust pubs. Walking on sawdust created a distinctive shuffling sound and a unique aroma, a blend of wood, beer, and decades of absorbed pub atmosphere. These were no-frills drinking establishments, where comfort was always secondary to raw functionality. By the 1980s, evolving health regulations began to spell the end for sawdust floors. Today, they have vanished entirely, taking with them the particular type of rough and ready pub they once defined. After a few pints on that sawdust, nature would inevitably call, leading you back to those communal facilities. The air inside a 1970s or 80s British pub was perpetually thick with smoke. Everyone smoked. At the bar, at tables, while playing darts, even while eating. Ashtrays overflowed on every surface, and the pervasive scent of cigarettes, deeply embedded in the furniture, had become an intrinsic part of the pub's character. An evening out meant leaving with your clothes, hair, and skin reeking of smoke. For non-smokers, inhalation was simply unavoidable. The very concept of a smoking section was ludicrous. The entire establishment constituted one. Landlords tirelessly emptied ashtrays, but they fought a losing battle. Ceilings were stained a deep yellow-brown, and a touch to the walls often left fingers sticky with nicotine residue. The 2007 smoking ban transformed British pubs overnight. With the air cleared, the true aroma of beer emerged, revealing the lingering reality of what had been. It was a stark contrast, yet even after official closing time, the night often continued for those privy to the secret. The lock-in was British pub culture's most poorly guarded secret, yet a cherished one. After the bell for last orders had rung and the doors were officially closed, trusted regulars would remain inside, curtains drawn, continuing to drink illicitly into the early hours. Though technically illegal, this practice was so widespread it became an unofficial institution. The landlord would secure the doors, draw the curtains, and the gathering would persist. To be invited was to join an exclusive fraternity, a profound mark of trust. Lock-ins possessed a distinct atmosphere, lights dimmed slightly, voices lowered to avoid attracting attention, and a vigilant watch was maintained for police near the window. Beer flowed, conversations deepened, and friendships were forged in those clandestine hours. However, the 2005 licensing law changes, permitting pubs to operate later legally, effectively ended the lock-in tradition. The thrill of an illicit gathering cannot endure when its very premise becomes legal. Before any lock-in could commence, a specific ritual had to be observed. At precisely 10:30 p.m. or 11 p.m. on weekends, the landlord would toll a bell, proclaiming the immortal words, "Last orders, please." This declaration invariably triggered a near Pavlovian response among British patrons. A frantic surge to the bar ensued, securing 1, 2, or even 4 additional pints to sustain them through the final moments. The bell itself was often a brass ship's bell or a handbell, rung with theatrical flourish. Some landlords offered a gentle tinkle, others attacked the bell with an intensity fit for a fire alarm, ensuring even the most oblivious patron heard the message. "Time, gentlemen, please," would follow at 11 p.m., the official closing hour. Patrons would nurse their final pints as the lights brightened abruptly, and the landlord began collecting glasses with increasing assertiveness. This ritual, repeated in every pub across Britain for decades, marked the rhythm of the nation's social life. These 21 distinct features and traditions rendered British pubs unique among global drinking establishments. While only one meal has been highlighted within these pub walls, Britain's broader culinary history, rich with 30 distinctive foods, offers a separate and extensive exploration. These establishments functioned as community centers, social clubs, and even second homes, defined by unwritten rules, peculiar customs, and unforgettable characters. Today, the smoke has cleared, the old carpets have been removed, and the trust-based tab system is a relic of the past. Modern pubs are cleaner, safer, and arguably better for our health, yet an ineffable quality has vanished, that unique combination of grime, warmth, and belonging that once made a British pub feel utterly incomparable.